Hey guys, what's up? Alright, so I've been making a couple YouTube videos for, I'd say about a couple months. I typically make videos um, heavily based around trying to get the highest parse I can and push as much HPS as possible in raid scenarios. And, I get people that will ask me, can I see your LVUI settings? Can I see your voodoo settings? Um, when do you typically ramp for this? What do you think about this? I also tend to be on the Priest Discord a decent amount and try and help it as best as I can. So I decided that I'm going to typically give a rundown of what I typically use for which bosses, as well as my settings and things of that nature. So first things first. Um, typically, uh, when it comes to secondaries, you're going to want to get a static corruption. And by what I mean when I say static is, so you can see my haste right here, and you can see my crit, and you can see all that. My haste is the highest of all of them, so I went expedient. I got a bunch of expedient. When I proc Vita, I'm typically sitting at around almost 100% haste. I got to that point, so then I started stacking severe. Now my severe is at 41%. I personally, and a lot of other disc priests, don't like it. I like it. I typically run 1 to 2 ineffable truths. Why do I do it? I use it because I like getting more radiances. I allow myself to blanket more often, and on certain fights, like say Wrathion for example, I am able to, if it procs, which if it procs just once, and it typically does, I'm able to rapture every single incineration. That's a pretty big deal on a fight like Wrathion, which is a fight that we don't typically do very well on, because we heal the initial burst from incineration, then we run and we have no way to atonement heal whatsoever. However, with Rapture, that helps us a lot because we're keeping a lot of that damage absorbed, not having to worry about it. Helps us stay up. As well as, if Rapture's up, Evangelism's going to be up too. Um, for farm, probably not the best idea to use IT. It's unfortunately unreliable, but for prog, it's unreliable. If you're farming though, have at it. Why not, right? You're just really killing for parses anyway, or loot. Um, but typically this is what I run. I switch between this raid set and this raid set. Essentially the same thing. Um, talents. What do I typically run? Schism, always. Feather, always. Solace, there is in the community, people are like, okay, well I can run Mindbender. If you want to run if you want to run Mindbender, feel free. It's not a bad talent. I just prefer Solace because number one, 7.5 second cooldown because it scales with haste. So does Mindbender. But it lets me feel more in control of my damage, and I can pop it constantly. On top of, if IT procs, the cooldown for Solace is essentially 3 seconds. 3 to 4 seconds, which means that if it procs well, I can actually fit 3 Solaces into my Schism if it procs at the right time, which I've done a couple times. This row doesn't really matter that much. Shining Force is what I typically go with. This row, 9 times out of 10 you're going to take Sins of the Many. For Prog, 100% of the time you're taking Sins of the Many unless it's Carapace. Carapace is basically the only fight in which Shadow Covenant has any value, and that's mainly because of the ramp. Pretty simple. Unfortunately, Shadowcov is really only for parsing, for farm. The logs do not count that it is taking, or that is basically giving anti-heal. They don't take that into consideration, and they end up essentially making it count as the heal, and then when you heal off the shield, it gives you even more healing, which it shouldn't do. But because it does that, it makes it look a lot stronger than it actually is. It's not really that strong. I just run it because I like to take advantage of the fact that it doesn't count it right, and I'm just running for parses. Um, but for prog, for getting a boss killed that you're, spending time on so you can get cutting edge or you can get your AOTC, 100% go Sins of the Many. Can't go wrong with it. You're always going to get value. This row, Purge the Wicked, 9 times out of 10 wins. The only time that Halo wins is if you essentially have one boss, because Purge the Wicked then doesn't have multiple things that it can constantly give tick damage. On a fight like Wrathion, I love Halo. I absolutely love Halo on Wrathion. Mott, love it. Wrathion, love it. Hivemind, Purge the Wicked is better. You've got multiple targets, you've got multiple ticks coming in, you're healing more. Not to mention that Halo only procs healing off of the first target it hits. It heals everybody, and then it'll give you atonement healing based on the first target it hits, which in theory sounds great, until you realize that it can hit something closer to you than the target of your schism, meaning that you don't get the schism bonus. So, when a lot of ads, go Purge the Wicked. When one boss, maybe two if you're feeling a little frisky, Halo, and then this row doesn't even, it's evangelism. It's evangelism. It's always evangelism. Now going into your Heart of Azeroth. You're always going to be using, well, I say always. Your major is always going to switch between 2, typically for raids, and maybe a third one. So, minor, you're always going to use Formless Void. What is it? Why? Because you're constantly having your raiders pop their essences. Every time they pop their essence, you get haste, you get instat. That's huge. Absolutely huge. CNS, you're constantly sitting at a huge increase of versatility, which means that you're having more damage done, you're doing more healing, and you're having higher survivability. Now, if you run ERT, you're always running Lucid Minor. Mana regen on top of versatility increase. If you're running Lucid Major, you're always running ERT Minor. Why? Mana regen, int buff. Now, you're running ERT on short fights that have burst damage. For example, Wrathion. Short fight, burst damage. Damage comes in spikes. Okay? Mott. ERT. There's no reason to use Lucid. You have infinite mana. And it's fairly bursty. Skitra. ERT. Short fight. Zenesh. Lucid. The damage doesn't come out extremely bursty unless you're 1 or 2 healing it. Lucid just allows you to blanket more often. Wrathion. Extremely bursty damage. You're going to go ERT. Il'gynoth. Fairly long fight. Want to blanket all the time. Damage isn't really bursty. It's just one of those. Is it very, very bursty, or is it, a long fight that you just want to blanket as much as possible? Blanket, Lucid. Bursty, ERT. The third one you can use is World Vein Resonance as a major. This one is essentially if you have damage coming out in bursts, but you don't really have the mana to use ERT. That's essentially when you would use World Vein. It's not bad, but considering that a lot of people don't typically run World Vein Major or Minor anymore, it's not as great. I don't like running it. I've ran it for prog. I only run ERT and Lucid now. But yeah, essentially, this is what you're going to go with most of the time, or you're going to switch these two and run that. Pretty simple. Another thing, we're talking about trinkets now. This is Vita. I have a bunch of Expedient. I run Vita because my Expedient buffs it even more, to the point where I constantly have high haste. I have high haste, that means my Mott Trinket is going to give me 16k mana every time I do it, because my haste is so high. This trinket scales off of your haste and your crit. If you have high crit, it's going to damage, or it's going to hit harder. If you have high haste, it's going to tick faster. Faster ticks means more mana. Speaks for itself. Typically, when we're talking about Azerite powers, what you want is you want to get 1 Enduring Luminescence. Why? Because it allows your Powered Radiance to last longer with Atonement. You're getting Death Throes. Now, in order to get Death Throes, you need to go into your Shadow spec, click Death Throes, and then go back into Disc. This isn't an amazing talent unless you're pushing dungeons, but it's basically the best that we can get from, Nyalotha, because we want Nyalotha gear because of Heart of Darkness. Heart of Darkness, extremely strong. All of our secondaries are great. We want as much of the secondaries as we possibly can. And then the third one, Depth of Shadows, it essentially makes your Shadow Mend Atonement duration fairly long and allows your ramps to be extended. I mean, speaks for itself. Leech is always good. I run 9% for a reason. It's great. You can never go wrong with Leech. Not to mention that Lucid increases your Leech and ERT increases the healing your Leech does. I learned that quite easily when I 0 to 100 myself on Mythic Wrathion and killed myself, because Leech healed me for 400k over 2 seconds. Felt great. Felt great. Alright, so now we're going into Voodoo settings. So, one thing that you can do, and that's what I've done, I have it to where my atonement shows up at a different color, so I can, so that I can track it. When you have 20 people, 25 people, 30 people in a raid, the last thing you really want to do is to have to look at every single one of those tiny corners to see if you have atonement. Changing the color of your bar makes it so much easier for you to essentially keep track of everything. Your entire bar is blue, you know you can go into a ramp. You Radiance and somebody's out of nowhere, and you've only got like 8 people that are blue. You might not want to pop that Evangelism. Not only that, but you might want to realize, or you might want to go back after the fight's done and be like, why was there only 8 people? And you can know immediately, at that specific point, okay, I did not get as much as I should have. Why is this? Other than that, can't really think of anything else, really. I run Haste Food, Int Pot, of course. You can pre-pot at the start of pulls. A lot of the times I like to pop a Rapture into a fight, but I'll get into that if I make a video about every single boss, which is what I'd like to do. If anybody would like to see that, let me know. Shoot me a comment. I'll start working on it. I'll go over my videos and I'll give a synopsis on why I did what I did when I did it, and how to improve for, in my point of view, what I did wrong and what you could do to replicate it or improve it. But yeah, just figured I'd make this video. Just, give a response to, or a blanket response to everybody that asked me questions. Anybody has a question, anybody wants some info, just hit me up. I'm happy to help. And you all have a nice day.